Wagwan. Good morning, good night. Welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, I'm your host, Melanie Byfield, welcoming you to another episode of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics. All our hearts were broken, right? When the Reggae Boys were denied qualification for the 2026 FIFA World Cup by the Democratic Republic of Congo. But they had more good news. A Belgian court ordered an ex-diplomat to stand trial in connection with the murder of Patrice Lumumba, the then called Congo's first prime minister. This old dude, he's like 93. He's the only person still alive who were accused of complicity in the murder of Lumumba back in 1961. In 1960, Lumumba led Congo, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, to independence from Belgium. He became the country's first democratically elected prime minister in the face of struggle against colonialism in Africa. If the trial goes ahead, this old guy is going to be the first Belgian official to go on trial for the murder of Lumumba. His brutal murder. Okay, some interesting developments to share. Grenada drops the oath of allegiance to King Charles. What does this mean? The new constitutional changes mean that state officials no longer take an oath of allegiance to King Charles, his heirs and successors. Instead, the oath of allegiance will be to the Caribbean country itself. These changes came in Emancipation Day, which was August 1, 2025, the day that Grenada and every other country in the Caribbean celebrate when slavery was abolished in the British Empire. The Prime Minister of Grenada back in 2023 was actually saying that he hopes, under his leadership that Grenada will transition into a republic. Big up Guyana. According to a new study, Guyana is the only country in the world that produces enough food to feed itself without imports. Producing enough fruit, veg, meat, fish, dairy, legumes, nuts, seeds, and starchy food. It's stated that only Guyana achieves self-sufficiency for all 7 food groups, while China and Vietnam attain 6. Anyway, so Wagwan constitutional reform. One man who hasn't taken his bare foot off the gas is Haile Mikael Cujo. I read an article by Anthony Turner. It was called Independent Westmoreland Politician with a New Constitutional Proposal. And, he buck up on Cujo and, they were talking about the 19th version of this draft document, right? Some of the things that Cujo says, he said that this document that I've proposed is a public document since July 26, 2021, when he first sent a draft to Parliament. He said that no one has really meaningfully engaged him yet. There was a good debate of it in UE. But here he's referencing, obviously, any meaningful interaction with Parliament. He goes on to say that the document gives sovereignty to the people of Jamaica, removing that from the British monarchy. So the country, he says, we would now own the country under this document. A key feature of his constitution, the article goes on to say, is the formal recognition of the Maroons as Jamaica's indigenous people, with guaranteed political representation and allowing for the impeachment of elected officials. Under his proposal, it also opens up land. He said a restructured ministry would eliminate squatting by making land and housing accessible, while renewable energy would become a national priority. He says we wouldn't be paying for LNG and all of these things. We use sunshine, water, wind to generate electricity. True that. I mean, when you look at what's going on with gas and oil and their crazy prices right now, you might ask the question, why is Jamaica not investing like crazy in renewable energy? You know, solar, wind, them thing. So, continuing with the article. So beach access, another long-standing public issue, is also addressed. It says this document, Cujo says, this document gives us access to everything that is ours in this country. As it happens, the Prime Minister actually announced the proposed beach access and management policy, which drew sharp criticism from JABEM, Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement, and was formally and unequivocally rejected. They stated that the framework entrenched rather than dismantled the colonial barriers that continue to restrict Jamaicans' access to their coastline. Back to Cujo. Despite resistance from elected officials, he says ordinary Jamaicans are responding positively. He says they are gravitating towards it. It's the elected officials who are opposing it. He said he rejects arguments that constitutional change must strictly follow the existing 1962 framework. Who made those laws? He said. These English people who came down here as pirates and robbed the country, and then we have to follow their rule of law? No, we need to get rid of their rule of law. Speaking of pirates, Patricia Green wrote a scathing article called "Why is Jamaica Celebrating Pirates?" Her article says, what is there to celebrate about pirates that Kingston would be allowed to designate an entire week for this? Historians describe a pirate as the lowest grade of seafaring robbers, the scourge of the high seas, and a menace that governments had to deal with. Their activities included coastal raiding, intercepting ships on the high seas, robbery, kidnapping, and murder. And then she talks about how the famous among them was Henry Morgan, who, as we know, was also a slave owner. She says, what is good about pirates at Port Royal that necessitates any national celebration of them? Should Jamaica endorse and allow a global promotion of the brand pirate, representing murder and mayhem, stealing and smuggling, debauchery and deviations, to become attractions and examples for our children and the country? Yeah, you tell me. Back to Cujo. He describes his vision as peaceful but transformative. He says, I've been saying this is a bloodless revolution. All it needs is the 63 people who were elected by the people of Jamaica to sign this document and bring it into effect on National Heroes Day 2026. He said words to the effect that he's already reached out to the Prime Minister and has made an application to meet him and talk to him, but he's waiting for him to invite him for that meeting so that Jamaica can go about getting the country back on track and to do what is good and proper. So the article concludes by saying, as he continues refining his constitutional proposal, Haile Mikael Cujo remains grounded and barefoot in Savlamar, but firmly standing on his belief that Jamaica's future must be shaped by we the people. It's now his 19th version, and I think it's really cool how he makes those revisions, because he's listening to what people are saying and he's prudent enough to make those changes. So I like that. A solid voice in the conversation of constitutional reform is Professor Roselea Hamilton. In her submission that she'd made in response, her submission to Parliament in response to the Constitutional Reform Bill, she was already advocating on the topic of local government. Now, she did an article at the end of last year, and it's called Hurricane Melissa's Lesson for Constitutional Reform. And I'm just going to share some of that article with you. So, she says, Hurricane Melissa's catastrophic Category 5 assault has ravaged Jamaica, laying bare yet again the fragility of an overly centralised system of government. As we confront the worst hurricane disaster in our history, we must assess whether our current structure of government can protect lives in an era of frequent and increasingly severe hurricanes. If we are serious about building back better, then restructuring government must be paramount. We need a decentralised structure that strengthens local government and empowers communities with the authority and resources to develop meaningful, localised climate solutions. This must lie at the heart of constitutional reform. It's vital to Jamaica's sustainable economic development and survival in a rapidly warming world. She says this centralised structure functioned well for colonial governors who ensured government served British interests, not the interests of the majority. Significantly, no meaningful power shifted to local government, the communities, or to the people of Jamaica. She says Jamaica has evolved significantly since independence, yet our highly centralised system of government has remained largely unchanged. The response to Hurricane Melissa exemplifies central government's limited capacity to meet the urgent needs of affected communities. The absence of specific local knowledge about the extent and nature of destruction in each community constrains central government's ability to assist those most severely affected. I mean, we heard that from Ms. Burchell and Ms. Malafu Fort, and the Prime Minister basically alluding to that point in Parliament, where they were talking about a dedicated person at the local level, and how MPs know their constituency and what their constituents need better than central government. Rosalie goes on to say, we heard Prime Minister Holness in Parliament thanking a Member of Parliament representing one of the most affected parishes for providing information he didn't have, which pointed to information gaps that exist at the national level. The problem is not simply politics. So then she goes on to say, how can constitutional reform help? Melissa's devastating impact presents a historic opportunity for constitutional reform to restructure and modernise government to enable us to rebuild by shifting power closer to the people. It should now be evident that centralised authority has limited the abilities of communities and local governments to respond effectively to Melissa's destruction. Constitutional reform can help by advancing two core goals. The first is empowering communities. Constitutional reform should formally recognise the rights of communities to participate in public affairs and shape decisions that affect their lives. And strengthening local government. Local government must be constitutionally empowered with authority, financial autonomy, and accountability mechanisms to respond to local priorities. Reform should ensure that local institutions can act swiftly and transparently, especially in emergencies. She also goes on to say that constitutional reform should seek to achieve climate justice, ensuring that vulnerable and historically underserved communities receive fair support and protection as Jamaica builds climate resilience. She says it is imperative that we restructure government by harnessing the strength, wisdom and aspirations of Jamaicans in every community. To do so, our constitutional reform discussions must go beyond debates about a local head of state and a regional final court. Melissa's lesson is that we must focus on restructuring government. We can do so with constitutional reform that empowers communities and strengthens local government with real power and authority to act, protect, innovate, and improve living standards. So we got Cujo saying, nice, I use this one instead. We got Professor Hamilton saying, you didn't modernize the government. Gordon Robinson is saying, nah, begin again. It seems like total destruction is the only solution. Gordon Robinson, he wrote an article last year called Begin Again. And I'm just going to talk about some of the... it's a long article, but I'm just going to share a little bit of it with you. He says, Jamaica now has a third-term government. A third term allows governments to create lasting legacy. Legacy is the creation of institutions to transform people's lives. He says Norman Manley collaborated with Bustamante to produce a legacy of independence. Andrew Holness's third term gives him the opportunity to create a new legacy. And then he cites this poem. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He grew whiskers on his chin again. The wind came along and blew them in again. That's what I say. Dude is like, shaved them off but grew them in again. I don't know that one. Poor old Michael Finnegan, begin again. Begin again is the main focus in this article. He says, so the mission of his third term must be real, fundamental, constitutional reform. The government must scrap the politicised nonsense that to date masqueraded as a constitutional reform process. Begin again. The reality of politicisation of this crucial national building process. The reality is politicisation of this crucial nation building process must be blamed on the government, he says, who after public pressure, held a few perfunctory town halls during which CRC chair explained what government planned to do. Quite scathing, right? And he says, I'm repeating the song Michael Finnegan because Jamaica must begin again on the road to republic. He says, this time a new CRC should be chaired by a retired judge or senior counsel with constitutional law expertise like Hugh Small, whose wide experience, high intellect, and most importantly, independence of thought provides the best available resume. The chairperson should also get 2 personal picks, JLP and PNP each picking 2, excluding legislators. And civil society groups, including the church, should be asked to select a representative. He says legal advice, if needed, can come from the Attorney General's chambers. The process should begin with the new Justice Ministry and the Education Ministry conducting island-wide education, because Jamaicans must understand what a constitution is and what the current one contains. He then says that a comprehensive citizenship consultation could follow, basically about what the new developed constitution would be like. He goes on to say the Privy Council isn't entrenched in the constitution. Norman Manley expressly allowed the British this win, in quotes, because he knew it could be reversed by a simple parliamentary majority vote in a Jamaican parliament. So he's saying, the Privy Council can be abolished any time. Immediately, the CCJ can be adopted as an interim court without having to constitutionally entrench it. When we are ready and willing, we can establish a Jamaican apex. Those actions right there could start the engine on the Porsche, but what about the 27 million Jamaica contributed to the CCJ? Yeah. So the question is, who's driving that Porsche right now? Must be a duppy or a gunman. Yeah. Rest in peace, Ernie Smith. Bad tune from when you were a little bit, right? This is a reminder, if you're not registered to vote, September 30, 2026 is the deadline to register for the November 30, 2026 voters list. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Podcast Index, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you want to reason about anything or you can't find any of the material I was talking about, you can email me on atasteofja@gmail.com. So until the next time, thanks for supporting this podcast. I appreciate it. Please subscribe, like, follow, and share it with your friends and family. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. One love. Yes, the word is love.